Bom dia.
Good morning. Welcome, everyone, for this third day of the International Week on Tropical Agriculture, a tribute to Alison Paulinelli. I am Silva Miranda. I'll be the moderator of today's meeting, the challenge of transforming agri-food systems with sustainability, main lessons learned, and the convergence of agricultural and environmental agendas. I'm pleased to be here today to coordinate the discussion with our panelists and with our keynote speaker. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. I am a professor and Department of Economics and Sociology of the University of Sao Paulo. I'm also a researcher in agro-industrial economics. And this panel promises to deal with interesting topics relating to sustainability in agri-food production. Since 1977, I have been looking at issues relating to the environment, sustainability, relating to agricultural policies, especially with regards to international trade. I think this discussion today is an important opportunity, not only for us to know a bit more about the initiatives that are being taken, of which we have very little information, but also it is an opportunity for us to inform the society on these initiatives and the inclusion of new strategies and new technologies to save the land and to face the many challenges or overcome the many challenges that we face, along with research institutes, public and private institutions. We have a significant challenge. Above all, we need to take the knowledge to the field. And so I think the discussion today, our panelists and the presentations that they will make will bring a number of important elements to the discussion and for our reflection. As I said, I have been following these issues since 1997, and I have been working with the Association of Producers. And unfortunately, then and even today, there is some amount of conflict between those who work with in the areas of sustainability, agriculture, and environment. But although there are many challenges, we need to take advantage of the energies. The environment, natural and environmental resources are extremely important for the activities of farmers to take place or to be done successfully, not just for them, but for the next generation, those who will take over from them. So we need these synergies, but we also need to work on communicating about the initiatives that already exist and the opportunities that they present. Before giving the floor to our keynote speaker, I would just like to tell our participants, inform them that they should not forget to register in the chat, put their name in the chat to register so that the organizers can be aware of those who have registered and forward materials to you. So to follow on directly to our first presentation, our keynote speaker today is Dr. Guy de Capdeville. Dr. Guy is an agronomist engineer with a master's in the protection of plants, master's in the study of plants from Cornell University in the United States, and postdoctorate in he is the Vice Director of Research at Embrapa, and Dr. Guy is going to speak about land-saving technologies, the Brazilian contributions for a sustainable agriculture. So now I'd like to, without further ado, give the floor to Dr. Guy de Capdeville, thanking all of you, especially our panelists, and Dr. Guy de Capdeville. You have the floor, sir.
So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for those that are watching us from other places in the world. I would like to thank the organization of the Agri-Food, a tribute to Alison Paulinelli, to invite us to participate in this event. I would like to send my compliments to the other participants that we have here in this section. I will present to you today a little bit about the kind of research we have done through the years that led the level of sustainability that we have in our agriculture in Brazil. So I will try to show you results that we are publishing in this document, Land Saving Technologies 2021, is a publication from Embrapa, where researchers from Embrapa and other institutions contributed with lots of studies that we made a compilation of information from those studies, and we are publishing this document, which will show you a little bit of what we have done throughout the years to become, to transform our agriculture in a quite sustainable one. So with these informations, what we have in terms of land-saving technologies are those technologies that allow an increase in food production in the same area already occupied with other crops, other uses, thus avoiding the clearing of forests and new areas of native vegetation for food production. So the idea is, how can we transform our food production in a sustainable production? So some examples of land-saving technologies that we have developed throughout the years with our partners. Some of them, such as Exalc, as Professor Durval is present here in this section, we're important partners for bringing out technologies that we have available today in Brazil for sustainable production. So with this, I will try to present first some of those technologies. The first one, I will talk a little bit more about it later, is the crop, livestock, and forest integration. So we name here in Brazil ILPF, or Integrated Crop, Cattle, and Forests. The other technology is the no-tillage system. So by leaving residues from the previous crop in the soil, you can make the soil quite conserved. You can leaving this residue on the top of the soil, you may increase fertility, you may hold humidity, and you can and save and conserve the biodiversity that exists in this soil. So this is quite important because it will conserve, it will hold the soil productive for much longer time than if we use so clean soil, so planting where you don't have any kind of residue on the top. The other is the biological nitrogen fixation. This is a technology that is saving lots of money for the growers, mostly in the soybean sector, because they don't need to add nitrogen to the soil for the fertilization of the soil. So this is something that's quite important because it reduces considerably the amount of fertilizers that you have to add to the soil. Another technology that is quite similar is the phosphorus stabilizing bacteria. We have recently released with a partner this Bioma-Phos. It's two bacteria, that one isolated from the soil, another one isolated from the plant. And those bacteria in combination, they can release the phosphorus that is bounded chemically in the soil. So releasing this phosphorus, the plant can absorb and use the phosphorus without we have to add phosphorus to the fertilization procedure. So, or reducing the amount of phosphorus that we have to use. Other technology is the low carbon agriculture. The low carbon agriculture, it's quite related and combined with the ELPF, the crop, livestock, and forest production. This is a way to produce cattle, a way to produce meat with sustainability, reducing emissions, because you are combining forest and crops and the cattle, and you bring a more sound and more easy environment for the cattle. So they have shade, they have grass that they can pasture. And so these characteristics make us able to provide a stamp of sustainability of this meat because of the way it was produced. So, and intensification is quite important here. I will show a little bit more about that later. Precision agriculture. This is something that's quite new, but it's very important. Here is the management of the crop. It's the management of agriculture meter by meter. So you can find focus of disease, for instance. You can find areas where you have to look better for irrigation. So many other things can be obtained by an app that is in the cell phone of the grower, and that will help him to manage the production and act specifically where it is needed. So making this reducing necessity for disease control products, or making a better way the irrigation of this crop. So there are many other advantages of using IT and precision agriculture for that, for producing, and it brings sustainability because of this process. Also, we have produced in Brazil a system that follow what we name ZARC, Agricultural Zoning of Climate Risk. The idea of these systems is with input coming into the system regarding the crop you want to produce, climate characteristics that you expect for the season. So this will help you to take decisions and avoid losses. Most losses in agriculture happen because we have losses caused by or excess of humidity or lack of humidity, drought. So those impacts can be mitigated by this system, and it helps a lot having insurance for the growers so they can produce with some certainty and possibility of having a protection for the production in some harvest season, for instance. And finally, the Pronasolus, which is a program coordinated by Embrapa with our partners and the Ministry of Agriculture, where we are studying all the soils in Brazil, trying to understand their structure, their composition, their need for correction. And in parallel, we are now launching another program that will use the soils collected to also study the microbiology of this soil. Knowing this microbiology will be an important marker to know if intended or not land use changes are providing some kind of impact in the environment. So something quite important, and of course goes in the direction of sustainability. So I will now present you some examples with some numbers. I will not try to exhaust the topic here, of course not, and because I am not the specialist in those topics, but some numbers are quite interesting, and I would like to present some of them to you. First of all, ILPF, it's, I need to move, sorry, something is in the front of my presentation here. Okay, so the integrated production system is a production strategies that integrate different productivity, agriculture, livestock, and forest systems within the same area. So this is a high level of intensification in the same area. So it avoids the necessity to open new areas. So when you do that. Another thing, oh, I'm sorry, it doesn't, it's not moving here. Just a minute, please. Oh, okay. It can be done in intercropped cultivation, in succession or in rotation, so that there is a mutual benefit for our activities. So Brazil, in 2015, we had a adoption of this integrated system by around 11.5 million hectares, mostly concentrated in those states: Mato Grosso do Sul, Tocantins, Minas Gerais, Rio Grande do Sul, and Santa Catarina. But although the most part of the integrated systems were occurring in these areas, it happens all over Brazil, and some large or smaller extension, but it happens all over Brazil. So some characteristics of these systems. First, they can be, you can organize a number of combinations. You can combine crop, cattle, and grasses. You can combine only wood and crop. You can combine crop, cattle, wood. You can combine all of them. And I would add one more. You can combine renewable energy as well. You could bring windmills or solar panels that would make even more sustainable the production system in one farm that adopts this technology. Here is the expectation of growth in this. So I told you in 2015, we had around 11 million hectares. Last year, we reached about 17 million, and we have expectations that in 2030, we will pass 30 million hectares with those systems, integrated systems. Advantages of it. First, it can be adopted by small, medium, and large producers in all biomes and in various formats, as I mentioned to you on the left figure. It also reduces the need to open new areas. The system is up to 5 times more efficient in earth-saving effect than other technologies. As you can see here, this, sorry, I couldn't translate because this was a table that was already prepared, but this VPLA means annualized net present value. So if you compare with crop alone or livestock alone, it is much more advantageous. The advantage for the grower is much higher, because you see here, it can have a profit of 300 reals per hectare compared to 18 and 2 in other systems. The profitability index is 50% higher, and the payback is reached in even in at least 1 year earlier than you can get for the other systems. And finally, it mitigates greenhouse emissions, has a potential for carbon sequestration, mostly because you introduce forests to it, and eucalyptus mostly, no, not native vegetation, but it could be introducing also reforesting with new vegetation, regular vegetation. And if you see here, depending on the combination, you have a much higher mitigation of emissions. So if you have agroflorestal systems combined with wood or fruit, so you see the level of mitigation here is quite high. I'm not a specialist here, but the numbers show clearly that emissions are reduced over when we adopt this kind of technology. So, but what is important here, this technology can be applied for family growers and for medium and large growers. Family growers, if you see, this is an experiment conducted by Embrapa at the northeast part of the country with family growers. So the plant here in these lines, as you can see, is a palm. The name is Macaúba. It has a huge potential for oil production. It produces around 4,000 kilos per hectare. But these plants only become productive after 6 or 7 years after you start up the planting of those crops. So for small growers, how can they get benefit of a crop like that if they have to wait for 6 or 7 years to have the return? So how can they keep and they manage this crop if they don't have money? So the idea is to intercrop with crops that they use in their daily basis. So beans, corn, soybean, and others. So this is quite important because after 7 years is when the big money comes to the small grower. So this is something that will change life, as we believe here that the system has this importance for family growers in Brazil. So land saving strategies in the sport fruit production. Probably Dr. Alberto Vilarinhos will tell you more details about that. I will just give you some numbers. Let's see some figures. The world harvest in 2018, the total fruit production in 2018 was almost 1 million tons in the world. So over 80 million hectares. The contribution in Brazil was around 42.4 million tons, around 4.6% of the total produced in the world. All of this production happened on 2.5 million hectares. And for each hectare cultivated with fruits in Brazil, 2 jobs are created, generating a total of 5 million jobs. So this is something important in terms of social contribution that those technologies give. What are the sustainable technologies used in the fruit production? Crop management, integrated production, land cover management. So what can you plant in between the lines of the fruit production that can conserve the soil, add some organic matter, and improve fertility, hold humidity, so many other characteristics that are quite important. Water and nutrient management, this is also something very important. Integrated pest and disease management, and finally, post-harvest management. So all those technologies combined to each other will make this production system quite sustainable. Another effect that, in terms of land saving effect, an increase in productivity, mainly for export fruits. You can see here in this table that the productivity in Brazil in the 19s was around, sorry, I have to move the image here so I can have the, so compared from 1990s to 2018, the average increase in productivity of those different fruits that you see here is 64%. And this brings a landing save effect of almost 1 million hectares Just to give you an idea, I didn't mark it here, but if you see the third column from the right to the left, so is the area needed for the levels of productivity we had in the 19s. We needed 1 million hectares to produce the same amount of fruits that we produce today in half of this area. So this is a very important increase in land saving effect by adding technology to these production systems. So going on, I will pass through this very fast, but those are the technological innovations in the citrus chain that contributed for the land saving effect. So development and use of rootstocks with greater precocity, resistance to various diseases, canopy, because you graft the plants, so the canopy has to be more productive with a better quality of juice. Adoption of new canopy varieties. So breeding programs are quite important here. Higher planting density associated with the use of dwarf or semi-growing rootstocks and or smart pruning, improvement integrated pest and disease management, improved soil management. This is quite important as well. Advances in nutritional management and citrus groves, significant improvement in quality of citrus seedlings, migration of plantations to regions that are more favorable to the production, and finally, a significant increase in irrigated orchards. Here, if you can see this graphic shows, this graphic shows the density of orange orchards by year of planting from 1980 to 2019. And you see that we have increased productivity considerably in the same area. So this is something very, very, very good to show because fruit production is quite complicated and energy demanding, money demanding. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about the soybean sector, the soybean production. Some figures of this sector. First, the harvest of 2019 and 2020, the total grain production in Brazil was 2,051 million tons, over on 65.8 million hectares. Soybean contribution for this total was almost half, 120 million tons, and almost half of the area as well, 36.9 million hectares. The productivity of soybean in Brazil today is around 3.272 kilograms per hectare. And I'm sorry, I have just between 2000 and 2014, but the number of jobs generated in 2000 was 2,300,000 something, and in 2014, 3,758,000 more or less. So there was an increase from 2000 to 2014 from 7.8% of the jobs to 12.1% of the jobs. And the total generated nationally, the increase was from 3% to 3.6%. So this is also significant. The area effectively cultivated compared to area saved, as if you consider the production standard that we have in the 70s compared to today, we have a very interesting graphic here. As you can see, if we kept the technological level that we had in the 70s for producing fruits today, so we would need at least 195% more area. Because of these improvements that I mentioned before, we use less than 40 million hectares for producing the same amount. So this is a huge land saving effect of more or less 71 million hectares. So this data is quite impressive. And this is all due to adoption of technology in the production systems. Okay, one important thing here in Brazil that one should consider. In 2008-2009 harvest, Brazil created a strategic committee, Soy Brazil. This committee brought a high standard for the production of soybean in Brazil. What they did, they launched what they named a Maximal Soy Productivity Challenge. And this challenge was applied to the 10 most productive growers. And it is a methodology of eco-efficiency, which objective is to verify the productivity, the profitability, and the eco-efficiency obtained by the producers with the highest productivity in each geographic regions of Brazil. So what parameters are considered in this methodology? Depletion of mineral and fossil resource for fertilization, freshwater eutrophication, water consumption, marine eutrophication, depletion of the ozone layer, formation of photochemical ozone, soil acidification, human toxicity of everything that is used, land conversion and use, and of course, sorry, it's not working again. Let me. Climate change. So what impacts on the climate those growers are producing? So as you can see here in this table, I'm sorry because I'm having some trouble with this image here. I don't know how to close it. So as you can see here, these are the, I translated the title of this table here, the soybean productivity kilograms per hectare obtained by the 10 producers with the highest productivity in the editions of this SESB, that is this group that was created, this challenge of maximum productivity compared with the Brazilian average. So those 10 most larger producers here produced more than the double in some cases than the average of soybean producers in Brazil. So this shows that when people are concerned about sustainability, they can get higher levels of productivity. And this is the proof. So these are data provided by CONAB and SESB, and those are official data in Brazil, organized by the Ministry of Agriculture through CONAB, which is the institution that organized this kind of information in Brazil. So this is quite impressive. And this is true. It's not, I'm not, okay, so you understand. So let's go to the cotton sector. And I'm almost finishing. Some figures of the cotton sector. Between 1976 and 2019, the cultivated area in Brazil went from 4 million hectares to 1.7 million hectares. So a huge reduction of area. But we had some economical problems and other problems here that helped to reduce this area. But if you follow from the same period, production increased from 1 million hectares to 4.3 million hectares. So this is technology applied to the production system. Here you can see this graphic. So the productivity increased over time compared to the reduction in area. So there was some kind of increase a little bit here, but this is normal because the production of cotton is increasing in Brazil year over year. What are the components that stand out in the model of cotton production in a tropical environment developed in Brazil? So the genetic characteristics of cultivars planted. So breeding programs are quite important here. The domain of the chemistry of the tropical soils and their management, control of acidity, control of aluminum, and other problems, irrigation, no-tilling, and many others. So no-till system with continuous soil cover and sequence of crops that combine characteristics needed for the system balance. This is what we are able to have a soil that is durable, can be used for a longer time without having to suffer important changes. Of course, proper combination of these components is essential for the success of this sustainable production. Around 80% of the Brazilian cotton producers are certified by two programs: the Brazilian Cotton Responsible and the Better Cotton Initiative. Both programs evaluate the cotton growers if they follow environmental, social, and economic criteria. And those are, for instance, the protecting springs and rivers and their farms, the vegetation that is on the edge of the rivers, to preserve the soil and the biodiversity or biodiversity by adoption of conservation practices, to strictly follow labor laws and international work protection conventions. So this is important, and of course, to respect contracts. So these are criteria that make the production system more sustainable. So what are the land-saving strategies and technologies used in the cotton production in Brazil? Genetic breeding for resistance to fungi, virus, bacteria, nematodes, avoiding opening the new areas to exclude those pathogens. Adoption of crop rotation systems that also include soy and corn, intensification in the same area. Adoption of integrated systems, as I mentioned before, using species such as brachiaria, grass, cattle, millet, sorghum, and several other crops, beans, pulses, peanuts, whatever, and adoption of no-tillage system. So those were very important for the sustainability of this sector. And finally, although the production of cotton in Brazil represents 10% of the world production, it corresponds to 30% of the world cotton supplied by, certified by BCI. So this is also quite interesting. And sorry, to conclude, over 4 decades, productivity jumped from 280 kilograms per hectare to 2,600 kilograms per hectare, with a land-saving effect in the cotton sector of 13.3 million hectares over this time. And finally, to conclude, land-saving strategies and the beef and cattle production. I would like to have more time to discuss about this, because this is one important sector. But I would like just, because of the time, I'm almost done, I need to show you some numbers. The number of cattle heads in million from 2004 to 2019 increased only around 5%, from 204 million heads to 213 million heads. But the meat export in million tons increased 86%, from 1 million to 1.86 million. And the carcass weight in the same period increased from 5,900 million tons to 8,219 million tons. This was an increase of 39%. And also, the weight increase was in carcass was in 2004 228 to 253%. In terms of pastures, there was no increase in this period from 2006 to 2017. The participation in the gross domestic product, it increased from 7.8 to 8.5, and the bovine slaughtered after 36 months decreased from 34.2% to 5.9%. So this is because we are gaining precocity with the breeding programs. Also, intensification of the systems, recovering of natural pasture that are degraded. So those numbers shows clearly that this sector is quite concerned about how they can produce with sustainability. Just to conclude, the kilograms of carcass per hectare year, the value was around 1197 kilograms in the 70s. It increased a lot over the time. I don't have the final calculations. Sorry, I didn't have time for that. But the carcass weight increased from 1983, from the 22.5 to 2019 to 2053 kilograms. So this also shows that productivity is increasing, and while we are trying to keep the same area for producing cattle. So finally, technologies that generate land-saving effect in this sector. animal genetic improvement, and reproductive biotechniques that speed up the productive cycle, precocity, fast weight gain, rusticity, and pasture improvement, management, and recovery, add adapted cultivars, planted pasture over natural pasture, recover degraded pasture, feed supplementation with pasture and cattle confinement, add and feed combining food and feedstocks, so increasing gain of weight in the same area, control of disease and parasites, and integrated production systems like ELPF. So basically, this is what I have to present. I'm sorry if I went over the time, but I think those numbers are quite interesting to show to everybody because Brazil is concerned about sustainability in its agriculture. Thank you very much. This is my contact in Embrapa, so feel free to contact us for partnership, for consulting, for whatever you need. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigada, Dr. Gui de Capdeville.
Thank you very much, Mr. de Capdeville. I really enjoyed your presentation. I'd just like to add something to his curriculum. He's a research director in Embrapa. I'd also like to make a few comments. Dr. Guy's presentation was absolutely brilliant. Indeed, he managed to tell us about the real transformation that we have seen over the last few decades in agri-food systems with sustainability. He showed us concrete results. And he also pointed out the lessons that we have learned. He also made it clear that there is a convergence between agricultural agendas and technology, and with all of the technology that he has shown us, he shows us that there are distinct advantages for production and increase of productivity. It also helps towards risk reduction and generally helps towards risk management in agricultural systems. He also mentioned especially the environmental and social advantages that are involved in these techniques, that whereby we try to mitigate the effects of pollution and to ensure better equilibrium in ecosystems, preservation of soils and land saving. So I think I must say that I'm very happy that you have really made it clear that there's a convergence in all of these agendas. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first panelist, who is going to talk to us about some considerations in this general subject, and he is Professor Durval Dorado. Professor Durval is going to talk about irrigated tropical agriculture, sustainability, feeding the world while preserving the environment and generating more opportunities. He's a graduate in agronomy from the University of Viçosa. He has a master's in agronomy in irrigation and drainage from the University of São Paulo. He did a postgraduate degree in physics from the University of California. He's Professor Durval is a professor at the University of São Paulo. And indeed, I'd just like to stress that he has not only national but also international agreement in the area of agronomy, with emphasis on models for agriculture. Professor Durval, please go ahead. Professor Durval, your microphone, please. It's on mute still. Good morning, all. Well, we'll be dealing with irrigated agriculture, as was mentioned by Professor Silvia Miranda, with a focus on Brazil, and a few details of this presentation have been taken from the book Irrigated Agriculture in Brazil, the experience of the 120 years of ESALC, and this Alison Paulinella is one of the editors of this book. There are 52 chapters to this book, and this study was carried out by the policy study group of the University of Sao Paulo, in association with the FAO and the Ministry of Regional Development. This is being used in accordance with the National Irrigation Plan. I would also like to thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this event, which is a tribute to former Minister Alison Paulinelli. I'd just like to inform you that former Minister Alison Paulinelli, at the beginning of his career, started indeed in this area, in tropical irrigation. He was a professor of the ESALC professor, and now he is a professor at the Higher School of Agriculture in Sao Paulo, where we had the pleasure, together with other institutions and public and private ones, to nominate him for the 2021 Nobel Peace Prize. So here we have a list of those countries that have sent letters, and the result is that we'll be hearing the result at the end of this year, formally. Now, I structured this presentation to last 10 minutes so that we'll be able to talk basically about the problem of the global overview and the strategic solution. As was mentioned by Dr. Guy Capdeville, there are a number of strategies, so I'm going to focus particularly on the irrigation strategy with the concern of sustainability, the focus of sustainability and the economic, social, and job generation, as well as environmental aspects. Obviously, the question of risk minimization for agriculture. The problem basically, just to put it into a better context, is that in 2016, we had 7 billion people in the world, and Brazil was responsible for producing food for 1.2 billion people. The FAO asked us to produce 40% of the demand, and which is inclusive, and increased our food production due to the population increase to expect 9.8 billion people by the year 2050. So in 9.8 billion people will mean that really 12 billion people. So if we transform the amount that we currently produce or which we produced in 2016, we'll have to produce far more to keep up with the population increase. So we will be having to deal with 2.32 billion people to provide them with food. 2,322 billion people. So this is going to be the focus of my presentation, just to complement what was stated by Dr. Capdeville. Basically, I'm going to be guided by the study, which was carried out by the public policy group of the FAO in order to identify the level of expansion and intensification that we will be having in the agricultural sector. Look at the current situation. You can see that Brazil is a continental country that has 85.16 million hectares. And if we subdivide this into two parts, the parts of on the right, you can see here these two maps, which is on the higher part, which you see natural vegetation occupies maybe 66% of the entire territory. And beneath that, you'll see the map of the land use. So basically, in this color in the clearer color that you see, the light yellow part, this is the area that is under pasture lands. That is about 22% of the national territory. And then you see the pink, you see the land under croplands. Those are croplands that is now about 19% of the national territory. So you may see that we still have areas under pasture, and this is one of the uses to which we have placed the land. So we are going to have to basically to try to look at this 9% and this 22%, this 9% on the croplands and 22% on pasture land. So our concern is to ensure that we have intensification and expansion. So we wish to have irrigation without deforestation. That is the idea. So I'm going to show you how we identify within the national territory the additional area that may be irrigated for the uses of agriculture, and which has been dubbed area for intensification and area that may be subject to irrigation and the area that may be expanded. So if we look at this slide, you'll see that in our territory, we have no agricultural cultivation. Basically, if we consider that the fertilized area we see that this total irrigated area is 8.2 million hectares. But if we look at the other area, we have about 5.3 million hectares that is irrigated area except fertile irrigation. Then we have 5.5% under coffee and other crops. That you may be seen in the central part with 1.4 million hectares and other crops with 1.3 million hectares. So we have 5,291,476 hectares. If you can see that for sugarcane, we have 2,903,915 hectares. So at the end of this presentation, I'm going to show you another 15 million hectares with could be an area that we could add to the production systems, and this would significantly increase productivity and significantly decrease the risk and generate more employment. So we are going to have production, far greater production, in the same area of land, because in the final analysis, that is what we're trying to do. At the end of this presentation, I'd like to identify what we have planned for the next 30 years, and as far as concerns irrigated area in Brazil. So we're going to go from 5.3 million hectares to 20.3 approximately, 20.3 million hectares approximately, when we see that we can have 2 sugarcane harvests, for example. This would mean that it would mean 40 million hectares would be cultivated and irrigated. Now, to go on, I'm going to see, we're seeing here that we have this map that you see on the left, that is under agricultural production, soy, with soy being the major crop, about 38 million hectares. And then we have sugarcane and successively other crops. However, if we use the criteria of mixed cropping in the physical area that can be used for agriculture, we can have about approximately 74 million hectares of land that can be used for crops. So we can have 26.7 million hectares in this area, this intensification area, which will be used for crops. If you look at this map, the map on the left, in the lower half on this left, you'll see an additional irrigable area. So we have identified 26.7 million hectares in this map, and further up the map, we see the pink part, we have identified 64 million hectares that may be used for agriculture. On the right, in the middle of the screen, we have a second map where we have identified 26.7 million hectares that are areas of expansion, and so with 175 million hectares for pasture land. In this yellow section, you can see pasture land, 175 million hectares, as I said. So we have 26.7 million hectares for intensification. So we have subterranean water. We have additional irrigable area of 53.4 million hectares. So for us to achieve all of this, we have had to follow a few technical criteria. Firstly, we had to look at the supply of water. So there was water carried out in association with the National Water Agency. We used data we looked at the water use in urban areas, water use for animals, and we have identified partially in the national territory the supply of water. We have a pretty good idea of the supply of water. We have also estimated and calculate the potential for additional water with indicator crops such as soya, corn, beans and pulses, as sugarcane, or to look at the water possible water supply. And we have together in keeping with questions of the considerations of transpiration and other data, we have arrived at a figure of 53.4 million hectares that can be cultivated with irrigation. So we have calculated therefore a calculation of micro to identify the irrigable areas in agriculture as well as in pasture land. As far as agriculture is concerned, we have identified areas for intensified agriculture as well as additional areas for expansion. As you may see in this slide, so we have 53.4 million hectares that are the result of the sums, the calculations that we made between intensification, area under intensification, and area under expansion, potential expansion. So but basically, we have identified 15.5 million hectares in the Brazilian territory. In other words, 8 million hectares in the areas under intensification of 7.5 million hectares of pasture land. So you can see that, considering, firstly, well, actually, when we started the calculations on these numbers of hectares, the possibility of the soil for agricultural systems was, we saw that with specialized labor and irrigation and other considerations such as transport and so on, that this land could yield crops. We also had to consider questions such as storage capacity, connectivity for the work. So through this work on the FAO Public Policy Group, we arrived at a final figure of 15.5 million hectares that could be used. So these million hectares could be added to the land currently under cultivation, but we could have more or less, if we calculate 31 years in which to attain the objectives that we have, that is to add this 15.5 million additional hectares of land for agricultural development. So I just like to say that this is, we have the cultivation of our professor, who has been, that is Professor Paulinelli, who has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. This is basically what I wanted to say to you, and I just give the floor back to Professor Miranda. Thank you very much, Professor Durval. Thank you so much for your interesting figures and information. It is also interesting to see that in both presentations, it is quite clear that there are major possibilities for intensification of agriculture without degradation of the soils throughout the national territory. I think this is extremely important. So without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to our next speaker, next panelist, to Professor Paulo Leme. Professor Paulo Leme is an agronomic engineer and an administrator. He has sustainability in agri-food systems, on the role of technology and innovation in sustainable markets. He has a master's from the Federal University of Lavras. He is assistant, he teaches in the Department of Economy.
He also participates works at the University of Lavras and is a researcher in marketing and the development of markets with an emphasis and analysis involving sustainable quality, certification for quality and origin. And so now I'd like to give the floor to Professor Paulo Leme. Thank you very much, Professor Sylvia. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I thank you very much for this invitation. And I'm pleased to speak about this very important system. In the alliances in which we work. So it's a pleasure for me to be here with you today. The title of my presentation is sustainability in agri-food systems. It's something that we have been working on here in the university in order to seek for, to seek out innovation that can be used, as well as technology-based agriculture. So it's a very direct. We need technology for sustainability. And these studies, which I will be presenting, have been done for the most part by our university last year, by persons in the department from economics and other departments of the university who have been working in collaboration with other institutions, with the Ministry of Agriculture and other entities. Currently, I am coordinator of technology in business, and it's a challenge for us to work in the area of agribusiness with the perspective of having a sustainable future. Obviously, and it's a pleasure to be here, and I would like to present UFLA, the Federal University of Lavras, and we have our dear Professor Alison Paolinelli. I'm not going to repeat everything that has been said about Professor Paolinelli and what he has done for Brazil, but I will also speak about what he has done for the Federal University of Lavras. He was very responsible, direct with other professors at the time in finalizing studies on agriculture. And if it wasn't for him and his associates, we wouldn't have this university, which is a world reference. And I would like to thank Professor Paolinelli. Thank you very much for being here. We are waiting for the international recognition of your work, which is very important for us as Brazilians as well. And we want to talk about sustainable markets. And I want to say we cannot speak of sustainable markets without talking about technology. Here I'm going to talk about agricultural, social, and digital technologies that have been used and launched us into the 21st century. Technologies that have been used in many countries that have brought about a revolution in Brazil. And so as a strategy for agribusiness, agricultural, social, and digital technologies have done a lot for us. I'm going to speak about an example and to show how the situation was in the 20th century. We had 4x4 meters plant cover productivity of 7 bags per hectare. And the quality wasn't very high. And the investment in technology for the coffee crops increased the productivity by an average of 30 bags per hectare. We have already heard about this. The sound is very bad, says the interpreter. So this has increased productivity, coffee productivity. Brazilian productivity is very well known throughout the world currently.
Quanto no mercado nacional também. Já somos grande comprador de cafés especiais também, temos lojas especializadas, temos vendas online.
The sound is very bad. The interpreter is not hearing the input. So this development, this revolution, this change, family farming is an example for the world. Small producers have been implementing technologies, and there has been an increase in the quality, greater quality with greater yields on the basis of the use of cooperatives. And so this is, we believe, an example for South America, Africa, and Asia. As you know, coffee growing, we work with different associations for certification of the coffee. We're working with small and family groups in small areas who are able to do this with financing from cooperatives. On this point, I'd like to demonstrate the importance of increasing dignity and quality of life by talking about income. And I am pleased to be working on this with a perspective for young people for the future. We want to continue working with family enterprises to increase quality of life. And so this is the focus, to work with technology in order to increase the quality of life and dignity for coffee crops. What we have here with the cooperation of the Neumann Foundation, which is focused on training for producers. And I would ask that we look at the results in order to increase and improve the income of these producers. And this we can see in the table on the left, the question of the cost of production. And then you can see the productivity in the next column. This is as a result of the use of technology focused on cooperatives. Furthermore, the producers who are part of the association are obviously having a higher income than those who are not organized. It's very important for the growth of organizations. This is a strategy that we have used to improve the conditions of life of coffee growers. Another project that we have been working on, which is also based on family farms with the coffee growers, is the project Ufla pelo Comércio Justo, which is an alliance in collaboration with fair trade producers in Brazil. And fair trade, which is an important brand. And we are hoping that small farmers will benefit with the training. We have received $137 million US dollars for this purpose. What we are doing in terms of training for farmers and for increasing quality. We also sell the products, sell the coffee products in our school cafeteria, providing information to our students. And so moving on to the question, how can we carry out sustainability actions for final consumers through technological dissemination, rural extension, organization management? And so the question that we pose is, what are the objectives? We need to ensure that there is transparency, marketing, and tracing. And when I talk about transparency, these are market movements of markets. We have direct trade markets that functions on the basis of transparency. And we are talking about in smart value added. This is the focus we need digital technologies. We need to ensure that we use smartphones. Another important project which is a project which is aimed at integrating, systematizing, and making information available to Brazilian farmers through the Technology Institute, along with the Ministry of Agriculture. This is aimed at the public institutions as well as producers. And for policymakers, we are going to be transforming data in information that will be included in a database, and we will be working with a system of monitoring and management of agricultural data. We're making the final adjustments to this project, which will provide information. And this is being done by our institutions. This project
recentemente, a Zeta foi reconhecida como o primeiro polo em Embrapa de agricultura digital no Brasil, trabalhando com geoprocessamento.
Is being done through the primary pole, Embrapa2, and which will be focusing on data science, big data, and analytics, as well as environmental compliance. These are some of the major institutions, a major base of territorial management, and this will allow us to meet a need for all international markets. Just to give you an idea of this platform, there are over 1.6 million users, 2.8 terabytes, 32 modules, 5.6 million downloads, and 484 deliveries, 85 deliveries, 25 federal initiatives. In terms of traceability, we are trying to ensure environmental security so as to bring this knowledge to final consumers or end users. This is the future. This is obligatory. This is something we must do. It's a rule. We need to work with this interoperability of data, which will enable us to ensure tracing throughout the entire chain. Here, we heard recently of the fact that we're going to need greater food security, and these practices that we're adopting with the opportunity that we have to work along with associations will allow us to work sustainably on the main productive chains. Certifications of origin and food security will be seen as no longer as a competitive advantage, but as a market condition. And just to conclude here, I would like to highlight some challenges that we have before us up to 2060: conservation of soil, climate change, in terms of new other challenges. We have new demographic patterns, and we are talking about feeding the population, 10 billion persons. We need to confront rural poverty and climate change and do what we are doing in a better way. And we want to recognize the work done by Professor Paulinelli. And the last question of this presentation, our challenge is, who will be the producer of the future? Here at Agritech UFLA, we are working on the profiles, or what profiles we need to take into account for the future. So I would like to thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much. And I would like to thank the University of Lavras as well. We'd like to thank Professor Paulo Leme for his presentation. Before giving the floor to the next speaker, I'd like to highlight certain concepts that you have just highlighted and which have supplemented or complemented what was said before, the importance of digital technology with the democratization of producers in sustainable agriculture. And I think it was important to make it very clear the fact that there are producers and that there's a market for family farm holdings. And there were small farmers in Brazil were sought out that respected this profile of sustainability. Lastly, I would like to highlight what you said about the importance of organizations so that the better use can be made of information available for planning activities. So thank you very much. Now we'd like to move on to our next panelist.
O Dr. Walter, ele é mestre em melhoramento de plantas e doutor em estudos de comunicação e inovação.
The doctor has a master's in the improvement of plants and innovation. He was at the University of Santa Catarina and is involved in international projects. He's a senior consultant in seeding at the Center of Development. He has more than 30 years experience in family farming in more than 40 countries on the different continents. So thank you very much, Dr. Walter de Boeuf.
Ok, muito obrigado pela professora, pela palavra. Em nome da Universidade de Wageningen, o centro de pesquisa aqui, eu gostaria muito de mostrar que estou muito feliz com a Embrapa e EUCA organizando este evento. Para nós, a agricultura tropical é muito importante e mesmo que não é nossa área de clima, mas temos muitos trabalhos juntos com outros colegas no mundo trabalhando nesta área. Eu vou falar um pouco sobre sistemas alimentares em diferentes escalas, porque a gente pensa que é muito importante de levar esta perspectiva este ano, também para esta semana, em preparação para a cúpula de sistemas alimentares que está organizado este ano. E nós, em Holanda, ao nível do governo, nós em Wageningen, na área da educação e pesquisa, mas também empresas grandes em Holanda estão trabalhando para isso. Para facilitar um pouco da conversa disso, eu fiz uma comparação da exportação alimentar do Brasil e Holanda, os Países Baixos, para esse slide, para colocar um pouco de perspectiva, que são os desafios para nós, em comparação dos desafios para vocês, em Brasil. É muito claro que a Holanda, um país que é menos de 200 vezes menor do Brasil, produz em valor a mesma parte em exportação agrícola. Somos parecidos em mesmo valor que a gente, vocês e nós na Holanda exportam. Alguns produtos são parecidos, alguns não. E esta situação é interessante, eu gostaria de colocar isso um pouco numa...
So in this situation, I would like to put this into a historical perspective. Because why Brazil is there and Brazil is here. So I would also like to do that from this perspective, because I'm very happy with the words of all the previous speakers and the perspective we have in Brazil and the Netherlands within the world. We are leaders responsible for 15% of current exports in the world. And we are in similar levels, not in volume, but in value. And that means that it's an honor for us, but it's also a huge responsibility. You can see the colors in orange. That's green is for Brazil, orange is for the Netherlands. And in the Netherlands, we have orange. It's for our soccer team. You know, we've never met in the finals in the World Cup, but we've always had very interesting competitions between our two countries. So here we are talking, and Brazil is proud for this, for having nominated a Brazilian candidate. And this shows that Brazil is beginning to reflect on this. And now we have this profile in the history of Holland. We started similarly with the intensification of the use of knowledge in Holland at the beginning of the 20th century, when the agricultural base in Holland was very weak, when our exports was very low. And that happened in our university in Holland. It's a 100-year-old university, but it's important to know that in these times, we already had public policy for specialization. In my family, we are growers, and my grandfather was the first one who worked on these vegetation issues. And there was an intensification in the production of milk. So we started with milk production, and then we moved to flowers, and then we have a high level of flower production in the world. So with the specification of what we are discussing now, but also with the use of technology to increase productivity, we use technology to increase our productivity, because Holland is also a business country. And that's how we started. So he was responsible after the Second World War, when countries in Europe were starving. So they created a very strong policy for corn production. Well, but Holland chose a different way, and we are very strong with that. We thought of our capabilities and on the use of technology in order to assume, for instance, a very strong role in this sense. Now, Holland is mainly responsible for, production of milk. We have a high level of milk production, and that area is an operational base where we have our important profile. And that was a very strong public policy of Seco-Mansholt, so as not to follow the lead of the other countries in Europe. And now in horticulture, Holland is very strong in a very small area. And we also produce fruit and milk for the entire world. but we are using a smaller area for that. So I think that it's interesting to see this story with Cico Manchel, that was the Minister of Agriculture. He was the first Commissioner of Agriculture at the European Community. And he was one of the persons that also put agricultural policies at the forefront. But his vision was very clear for us to have now this profile of one of the leaders in this area. But the leadership also brings about responsibility. And it's interesting to see how Cico Manchel, at the end of his life, he reflected about it. What was the impact of the policies? And he also made some reflections about the common policy in Europe. That was good for the autonomy, but he also, presented several disadvantages globally. So he reflected strongly about that at the end of his life, about the good and bad things and what is needed to make progress. And here I would like to show you where we are now with the summit. We have 4 important events in this year, very important events to be prepared and to see what our profile is in the area of agriculture for the future. So we have the COP15 in October, and the first UN Food System Summit that is also very important for us. And this week, this Tropical Agriculture Week, also organized by Brazil and ICA. This is another pre-event also that is very relevant for the summit. We also have COP26 in November and another important event that is Nutrition for Growth in December. And this fourth element also makes us think whether we are truly leaders now. So how can we assume that responsibility in order to move forward to the future? So here we also see the food systems in this graph. And I think that many of the conversations we've just had have shown many aspects of this. The agri-food activities that you can see in orange in the chart, you can see that that area can only make progress when there's a very strong connection, important drivers or important factors, social and economic factors that move all these bearings so that they drive for change within the system. In other words, as the previous speakers have already mentioned, we have this approach of food systems, and that's very important because that combines goals, it combines in all these in a single structure: food security, healthy and safe diets, and the inclusion and the benefits of equality, and also resilience and flexibility. So we are working on that perspective here at the University of Watson, thinking of future prospects. We are also working on this approach in several countries in Africa. So what are those approaches that are more impactful for us? Not only food security, but also this is related to food and nutrition, to the quality of that in our country and also in Brazil. This is very important. In Africa and Asia, we are still implementing these programs. The traditional situation of many families that lack other, means of livelihood. In some parts of Europe and in Holland, we are also working on mitigation of climate change. a way of working on that, and I was truly very satisfied with that, were the public policies implemented here that are oriented to circular and regenerative agriculture. It's interesting, in a country like the Netherlands, we are trying to find ways to work in that sense, so as to combine forest, cattle, and other forms of production. Well, this is a way of working in the circular agriculture. Next week, we are going to have elections in the Netherlands, and that is one of the issues. What is the impact of reducing CO2 and nitrogen for the crops? How are we going to work on that? In our cattle sector, we have 30 or 50% in our country that is dedicated to that aspect of production. So that's a way of intensification of agriculture in the space we have. Another very important element related to that is the Green Bill. That is a public policy in Europe that will offer value chains that are shorter. For example, in horticulture next to urban centers. And that's going to have an impact in Brazil also, speaking of soybeans and the import of vegetable protein. And Europe is going to try and reduce that. For that challenge, and with this impressive profile, we really have to find that connection with Brazil. What is that connection? Well, both of us have large corporations in that area. We have research centers at universities that have been very involved in this for forever. Embrapa also, our researchers also work with many projects in Embrapa. So we need to find the impact of these challenges for the supply chains and for the markets. How are we going to work on that? As I mentioned, this system, the ILPF system described before, of crop, cattle, and forest, we don't have sufficient knowledge. So we're looking for partners that have a strong knowledge of tropical agriculture. And what's the largest company working on that in the world? Embrapa. So we need associations in order to work out our problems in agriculture. And now, well, as the precision agriculture projects have already been mentioned, the use of artificial intelligence at scale, that is also different because we start at small scale but super intensive. So Brazil is looking for that intensification, and we are also applying that, but at a smaller scale. For that, that's very clear. So there's potential for us to work together. And the other thing is also to work on agriculture projects that are pro-nature, to see how to deal with that in the aspects of resilience and all that, because food resilience is also important. And I wanted to finish with some words from our president at our university, Luis Fresco, but they're very happy with the organization of this week, because the idea is to get ready for the Food Systems Summit this year. So Brazil is also assuming this profile, and we are looking for ways in which we can get ready and work jointly. And that way, I would like and to take Professor Silvia's words. She was very clear that with this system, we can combine important goals together, and that is an agriculture that produces healthy food for the world, protecting producers, the population, and the plan we have to give to the future generations. Thank you.
Dr. Walter Leboeuf, Thank you very much for that presentation. I took a lot of notes. We don't have much time, so I won't comment, but I think that the mention of possibilities of comparison is important. I'll leave the questions for the end, and hopefully that we will be able to examine these perspectives, these prospects. I'd now like to give the floor to the next speaker, Dr. Eduardo Arce, who is going to speak about fostering sustainable livestock for resilient and sustainable food systems. Dr. Eduardo Arce represents the FAO, is a mechanic engineer at the University of Costa Rica. He has a master's in agriculture from the and has many years experience in research and has been analyzing the socioeconomic aspects with private and public universities. He has experience teaching at undergraduate and graduate level at the university and works in different areas of the economy. Also, he has experience in management and engineering. Thank you very much, Sylvia. I'd like to greet you especially and our keynote speaker, as well as my fellow panelists who have made some important presentations today. I'd also like to greet all the participants wherever you might be located. And I would like to thank Embrapa and ICA, who are fellow travelers in this field. I'd like to thank you for this invitation, because through this, we are able to share our experience in the FAO. As the title of my presentation suggests, we are fostering sustainable livestock so that we may have a resilient and sustainable food systems. This is the global agenda. Normally, it's known by the English acronym OGASL, and doesn't only include bovine cattle, but other animals. As we know, livestock is socially and economically important on all continents because it fulfills many roles in the interest and support of human livelihoods. It transforms inedible materials into proteins which are apt and appropriate for us to consume. It is involved in transportation, traction, and resilience, capital for those who have to face adverse circumstances. At the international level, it is important to note the contribution of Latin America and the Caribbean, because we provide 29% of beef and buffalo meat, 25% of poultry, and 10% of eggs, and 11% of dairy products, milk at the global level. So as of today, we see that livestock is going to be an important part, will play an important role in terms of feeding the world. However, we have to note that livestock has significant challenges in terms of the environment, nutrition, health, and animal welfare. For example, it represents 14.5% of total greenhouse emissions in the world. And furthermore, many of the pasture land are being degraded and the potential for deforestation is a source of concern. However, there has been a series of publications in the 1990s and 2000s, the first decade of the 2000s, which provided the basis for some governments asking FAO to start a global agenda for sustainable livestock to promote this world sustainability for livestock. There's the revolution of Delgado, Galgason in 2006, and livestock a changing landscape in 2010. And so this is how the global agenda for sustainable livestock came about in 2011, involving stakeholders, which would be a voluntary one, so that sustainable livestock would be achieved. Furthermore, there were other guiding principles, that is, it would be open and voluntary. Anybody could come in and leave, opt out when they wish. It would be inclusive and consensual, change-oriented, evidence and knowledge-based, and would have respect for the different points of view with regard to livestock, which we know are many. In 2016, the association decided to align itself with the SDGs of the 2030 agenda. And as you can see on the screen, they chose 9 of the 17 sustainable development goals as the most important to which livestock farming could contribute. Furthermore, in 2018, 4 areas for sustainable livestock were chosen, presented in Berlin. And the idea is to have a more concrete way, a specific way of dealing with it, of implementing these SDGs. These are livelihoods and economic growth, food and nutrition security, animal health and animal welfare, and lastly, climate and natural resource use. The agenda has 117 partners organized in 7 clusters, which you're now seeing on the screen. Latin America accounts for 26 of the 117 partner organizations. And if you look at the different areas, public sector, private sector, academia, donors, NGOs, social movements, and multilateral organizations, as well as intergovernmental organizations. And lastly, the agenda has 8 action networks, which provide evidence. Pilot projects are carried out in the various areas related to sustainability. For example, the value of grasslands, pasture land, closing the efficiency gap, livestock for social development, animal welfare, LAMP, which has to do with antimicrobial resistance, and the environmental aspect, as well as the impact on social systems. We have 4 champions of research champions, which are responsible for 2 of the actions. The first is the University of São João do Rei in Brazil, which is responsible for this action network on the use of resources, and the other in Colombia is in charge of the silvopastoral systems. As I said, in Latin America, we have 27 partners. Brazil, Argentina have the greatest number of partners in the public and private sectors, in academia and research, as well as in social sectors. We're very pleased that last week, the Brazilian government was included with the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, and Food as one of the members. And Embrapa has been a significant member for a number of years. And we have Colombia, Ecuador, El Salvador, Mexico, Panama, and then we have the others from the Caribbean region. Most of them have their governments involved in this initiative. We have regional partners as well. We work with CATIE-SIAT and with ICA, and we are joining our efforts in various aspects. So we are very grateful for the support from Latin America. Well, what happened in 2020? In 2020, the global agenda decided to add something important to its strategy. It decided with its partners and donors and with the Gates Foundation to have a series of changes that these sustainable livestock systems would be linked to food networks. And the work was carried out for 6 months. And after that, we had a first version. And what has been confirmed is that the main role of the global agenda is to be an important catalyst to transform livestock systems that are sustainable and that would be sustainable with sustainable food systems. This was placed within the sphere of control. The agenda works on facilitating dialogue, evidence, and commenting on practice and policy changes. There are other two areas, spheres of influence, with the support of the University of Wageningen, that is to accelerate sustainable practice and policy effectiveness, and a sphere of interest where we want to place sustainable livestock options in sustainable food systems. We are wondering how to continue implementing the reflections made by the group in 2020, and the answer came about at the world meeting, the global meeting, which was held last year within the context of the COVID pandemic. And we are beginning to develop mechanisms and tools which are very important, which will allow these meetings to be converted into important elements for partners to speak among themselves, act, and reach important conclusions. For example, this image, which you will see on your screen, shows how partners syncretize the work to be carried out if we want to continue evolving and moving towards greater levels of sustainability. There is a systemic approach which needs to be holistic, which needs to take into account resilience, especially barriers to resilience, need to take into account health, one that is worldwide, planetary. We can't have a good human and plant health if the planet itself is not healthy. And then preparedness. These elements need to be combined with key actions, which our partners are working out in their groups as well as in their action networks, the provision of scientific evidence, fostering sound policies, enhancing dialogue, communication, connectivity, and the promotion of multidisciplinarity, transdisciplinarity. Transdisciplinarity doesn't mean that we're only communicating among disciplines, but we are transcending these disciplines to achieve greater sustainability. And so, thanks to the efforts that have been carried out, such as the changes in 2020 and the virtual global meeting, where there were important regional inputs for this year and for the next 3 years, we are hoping that our partners will be able to work and participate actively in various events, including the UN Food System Summit, which is one of the most important. Prior to that, we are going to have a meeting, which will be a virtual global meeting chaired by regional consultations, where we will be looking at resilience, focusing on resilience and how to ensure that the barriers to livestock systems becoming a sustainable part of food systems can be overcome. And we are hoping that our partners will be participating actively in events leading up to the UN Food Systems Summit, including the pre-summit meeting that will be held in Rome and one to be held in Glasgow. The summit that will take place in New York in September, We are also going to participate in COP26, and we are looking at what we can achieve. And then in the middle of all of that, the association will be developing regional chapters and will be dealing more directly with the problems and needs of the regions, from the regions. The first 2 pilots will be in Latin America and Africa, and we're very enthusiastic and eager and hoping that we will have very good results. And then for 2020, for the action plan for 2022 to 2024, we are going to include all those elements so that our partners and donors may have the opportunity to continue working on the sustainability of livestock systems as a fundamental element of sustainable food systems. Here, I'd like to say that this year we have received news that our partners are carrying out very important initiatives. For example, there is an initiative that is going to try to develop efforts to the net zero daily. So it's a world effort so that we can find the necessary ways of achieving low carbon products in dairy systems. Brazil has a very important and significant initiative. Costa Rica, Argentina are hoping to work along with them. We have several partners who are developing this knowledge, which I believe this will be a very interesting project. We are also going to be looking at the obstacles to sustainability, and we are going to be developing a methodology to evaluate the value of livestock to the sustainable development of communities. And I would like to just transmit to you comments from our partners who have expressed recently their concerns because they see that the 5 paths, 5 action paths of the the Food Systems Summit could be seen as silos when really we are seeking a cross-cutting effect, and livestock is a cross-cutting theme or issue for the 5 areas that will be discussed. Livestock can play a sustainable role across all these areas. And lastly, I would invite you to visit our webpage, and there you will see some of the reports that have been provided by our action networks and groups of partner groups. For example, livestock and poverty reduction, silver pastoral systems in Latin America, and their contribution to achieving the SDGs, livestock and or dairy and climate change, and then policy developments, providing innovations to our livestock systems. We have a lot more material relating to the conclusions of the last meetings which we have had, which I have mentioned to you, which have been fundamental. And lastly, I would leave you with a thought which summarizes what we're seeking and hoping to achieve among our partners is that turning the results under their control into useful and influential messages and tools for policymakers and producers so that we can build together a better, sustainable future with sustainable livestock. Thank you very much. We would like to thank our donors, the Swiss government, the Gates Foundation, the government of the Netherlands, the National Confederation of Livestock Confederation of France, and others. Open to any questions, and you can write to me through my email. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eduardo, for a very interesting presentation indeed. And I also made abundant notes. Unfortunately, we do not have a lot of time to mention all of these notes. I think that livestock is one of the most important sectors in general in the agricultural sector for this question of sustainability. I'm very happy that you have chosen this particular sector. I now like to go on to our last panelist. So after which we'll have a few questions from our panelists, from our participants. But before this, we will have our next panelist will be talking about organic fruit culture, sustainability, quality, and value. Dr. Alberto Villaniros from Embrapa, the branch of Mandioca and Fruticultura. He has a master's from Viçosa, University of Viçosa, a doctorate from the University of Montpellier in France. And he is a researcher from Embrapa, that is a National Research Center of Mandioca and Fruticultura. He is the Director General of that. He also has extensive experience in many other areas. You have the floor. Thank you so much, Professor. Can you see my screen? All right, good. Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Well, it's afternoon here in Brazil. I'd just like to talk to you about organic fruticulture. And this covers quite a bit of what was mentioned in previous speeches. I would like to talk about organic fruit farming in general. And speaking a little bit more in detail about fruit, some details about fruit farming, and also talking about the technologies that Embrapa uses for organic fruit farming. Well, let's get to it. I just like to tell you that fruit farming, organic fruit farming, has everything to do with the international trends, that is, the trends of complying with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And I think this was already mentioned. This is to do with linking market trends and food, the question of access to food, questions of health and well-being, convenience and practicality, reliability and quality, sustainability and ethics. So fruit must be in good condition, it must be attractive, it must be good for your health, and it must be a convenient and practical market and accessible in all forms. Certification is in the very DNA of the organic production of this fruit. So very quickly, well, I'm going to talk about organic production in the world and just give you a few details. We do not have very available data, but I'll be speaking in general, and then at the end, I'll talk about fruit production. We have lots of organically produced food and drink in Europe and China. It's a growth market. It has been growing over the last few decades. And very often when we have this type of market, there's no real growth. Very often that is. And this indeed has happened, as has already been mentioned, because the population who are very, people link organic questions with food security and food safety. So since the year 2000, the world's arable land for organic production increased from to 62 million hectares throughout the world. It is quite clear that this has an impact, and the increase in land area has been impressive, but it's just but the agricultural land is still small. 1.4% of the world's agricultural area is destined for organic cultivation. And it's important to note here, when we compare it to livestock raising, for example, that fruit and vegetables make up the largest category of organic farming. As I said, there are almost 15 million, from 15 million hectares to 72.28 over the last few years. And here I have a graph from 2019, where you can see that one of the major areas, it can be found in Oceania with Australia and others, and followed by Europe in second place. I'm looking at Brazil, that you can see to the right of the graph, which is a very small amount. Now, with respect to the food systems summit, and well, we have to look at where the areas where major manpower is required. And this is in Asia, with 15 million producers, followed by Africa. And with respect to profitability, then it is quite clear that in Europe and North America, these are the areas where you have the largest concentration of interest in consumers in organic goods. So that is therefore the highest world demand, the world's highest demand. Concentration is a big problem, because the certification process and it means that you must have some standardization from one country to the next. And in some cases, when you have organic production in Latin America, where exports are usually focused on Europe, you see that this an increased waste of energy and expenditure in the long chains of supply. So we have to see how we can reduce this waste. We have a massive increase in arable areas that have been converted to organic culture, organic cultivation. So these areas have to be maintained, and they have to obey a logic of competition, in general words. By increasing costs, all of these contribute to an increase of cost, and this leads to a more elitist type of market. So, as far as Brazil is concerned, we see there has been a growth in this type of organic production, but in the type of production that we have, the question of the price of land, logistics concerning, for example, inputs, research, transport, all of this adds up. And we have to define and determine our priorities. And when we compare these with the traditional agricultural products, we have to consider all of these aspects. Another problem is the lack of data in Brazil, and this makes it difficult to have strategic planning for this sector. We need, for example, to decide where we must have major investments. On the other hand, there's a good news, that is in Brazil in 2020, if we do have updated data, with it has seen that the sector grew at 30% and generated $1 billion. And the certification process through the participatory guarantee system and marketing of organic products together with other products. And when we compare the public policies of other countries and compare these with the policies in Brazil, we see that these policies guarantee food security, especially for smallholder producers in Brazil. Now let us look at fruit production in general, just to give you an overview. Around 44 million tons of fruit are produced, and $6 billion on an annual basis. The sector holds about 16% of all Brazilian agribusiness labor. And despite the problem of the pandemic, we have managed to expand and by more than 1 million tons of exported fruits. And this is what I'm saying is that when we talk about, I'm just talking about fresh fruit. Brazil is the largest producer in the world of orange juice. That is representing almost $1.7 million. So I'm just going to dwell a little here on looking at the effects of the pandemic and even the opportunities that it has presented. We have seen a greater concern for life and for health. And this indeed is giving us a unique and interesting opportunity, because fruit production has everything to do with health. It has to do with pleasure, enjoyment. It has to do with increased immunity. Now, we have to guarantee health, and we benefit from this, people's concern for their health, and we can benefit from this madness that we have due to the pandemic. But it's a situation that we also have to assess. We have to, many fruit producers have followed this, and they have tried to ensure greater visibility for their production, for their products. And this has brought the producer closer to the consumer. I'm just going to give you a few examples. The country is becoming unifying to market organic fruits and distribute for the distribution not only of organic fruit, but also ensuring sustainable production. And that's very important because organic fruit production is very important. And it has everything to do with the needs for human nutrition. I'd just like to show you what we are doing in Embrapa in Bahia. We have set up organic fruit production. We have started with this technology rather more intensively. We started in 2011, and today we have the greatest experimental area in Brazil, the largest areas, and this type of work has helped us to really validate our systems for organic production. We have validated organic systems in pineapple, banana, citrus, mango, passion fruit, and what we call spondiars, which you can find in the northeastern section of Brazil. Now we have new varieties that are available now, which have been adapted to the organic system. We have, for example, we have the new varieties of passion fruit, and the control of the ants, which is very important for in organic cultivation. We have to control the ants and other pests. We have pineapples, hybrid pineapples that are being sold $1.50, and I think that's a very good price. And this has made things easier for our producers. We're also working on the production of a banana which is resistant to the major pests and diseases, resistant to Panama disease. And we have there an area of underproduction, which from with our colleague, Mr. Oliveira, which clearly shows an area with different variety and which is not susceptible to the diseases. So you should see the big difference in production that this has meant. So of course we use significantly small amount of pesticides per year because of these resistant varieties. So we have what are the varieties that we have? The Princesa banana that is being exported to the United States, and it has great potential. We have partners who have been working with Embrapa for a long time and that are using and exporting this variety. So this is very interesting. I remember that I told you something about the whole question of technology, that is technology that is specifically used for this type of production, this type of crop. We know the other banana producers have really seized on this, and it's interesting to see how good this is for immunity, for human immunity and human health. There are other producers who are distributing and marketing safe foods, safe fruits that really raise the possibility of a growth in the organic food production. This is an example of what is going on, but this goes to show what is being done. We are very involved in this. Of course, we have other partners who work with Embrapa, who work and who aim to satisfy the market for sustainability. Now we have other varieties that are resistant to plant diseases. And this is a major disease, for example, that traditionally attacks these crops, and we are sure. For example, we have a species of grape that is now being exported and which is also resistant to a very large degree of large amount of diseases. So we also have a type of guava, which is called Bayansa, which has had quite an impact on the production due to the technology that has been used for the production of these fruits. So this goes to shore up the whole importance of organic production, organic food production. So in this year, in 2021, we have formed a partnership with another association and with one of the first and we think that it will be possible to transfer these varieties and transfer this sort of technology to be used in other traditionally cultivated varieties. Now, this really is the future of organic agriculture. That is the reduction of inputs for the crops. We have the Beluna banana variety, that can be cultivated. One variety can be cultivated in the north and one in the south. And there is a variety of passion fruit that before was limited you could be done in a limited area, but now it can be used and cultivated throughout. Now you can see all of the details on our webpage. We also have an available set of publications. It is free of access. And of course, we have possibilities for distance learning, training on organic fruit growing. For example, at the end of 2020, we had a training session, and it started in the end of 2020 to February 2021 this year, and we have managed to train a large number of people. More than 1,000 people enrolled and 12,000 people viewed our courses. I'd like to thank you once again, and thank you so much for the opportunity to address this meeting. I just leave you with a photo of Dr. Alison Paolinelli inaugurating this center in 1973. Now, just taking advantage of the homage which is being paid to our ex-minister and to pay homage to him. Now I'll give the floor back to our moderator.
Thank you. Thank you. There are obviously great possibilities for increasing sustainability of livestock. I would just like to thank all our panelists, all the speakers, and I am going to move now directly to the questions. I'm going to read the questions that were sent to me by the organization, and I will read the questions that are directed to each of the panelists. I will ask you to answer, and then we'll move on to the next question. Rodolfo, the public is asking, the organization is asking you to keep your cameras on, rather, during this discussion. The first question is for Dr. Capdeville. How to implement systems for commodities, since most of the producers are not interested in diversifying their production systems? Thank you very much for that question. No doubt, the adoption of technologies is something that requires communication, that requires training, and verification of the results, because we need to show the producers the advantages that exist. Some producers have adopted these. What we have is a sustainable development model, and this is something that is based on unquestionable data. So it's a question of convincing them. I am pleased with the fact that most of our farmers are farmers who use the technology. And this has made a big difference. And so I am expecting that with communication, with greater communication and training and appropriate data on productivity, we can convince them. It's a question of time. Just as an aside, I had a slide in my presentation where I put the actions of Professor Paolinelli and the differences that he made to agriculture, but that didn't work very well. All of the periods started with the then Minister Alison Paolinelli. And this transformation led to a change in institutions, rural extension, and so on. This is what has made our agriculture what it is today. I'm sorry I didn't mention this at the time, but Minister Paolinelli was the person who started what we have become today, and this needs to be said, no doubt. Professor Sylvia, consistent data, and the need for sustainability for external markets is crucial. Thank you very much, Dr. Gay. And now I'm going to put a question for, we have a variety of fruit in Paraíba, Cerola, cherry, mangaba, passion fruit. How do you go about constructing the system in that region? This is for Dr. Alberta Villarinas. That question is for me, says Dr. Dorval Dorado, but there needs to be a market study and a verification. You need to verify the economic viability, feasibility, and then for recommendations to be made based on the study. Perhaps all of this can be done using a territorial register, a national register, to calculate additional cattle. We had to use a base using the IBA database, and on the basis of the study indicate the species that would be viable, feasible as a function of demand. In other words, recommend what would be economically viable in accordance with the demand and what we have set up. Just to confirm the role of irrigation, for greater irrigation, and for other fruit species and pasture land, there is this possibility of using irrigation technologies in pastures. I'm taking advantage of that question to ask this one. No, in our work, we have data that are divided into the municipalities. We have the information per municipality, and then the area for pasture land, the irrigable land. And so we have municipalities, and this information that we received was given to the Ministry of Rural Development. So what we did was we made a calculation which yielded results by municipality. And so for each interested municipality, and then we looked at additional irrigable areas with pasture land. The next question is for Dr. Paula Leme. Soya and maize have been what can you say about those crops? I think that question would be for Dr. Durval, because I'm seeing here, I think there was a confusion. Well, Dr. Durval is a specialist in that, I think, in that area. Well, I am just following the guidance that has been given to me. I know, but Dr. Durval, if you want to comment, you may. Sorghum and is resistant to drought. There's high productivity, and it's excellent feed for cattle. What are the projections for those crops as well? Yes, there are projects afoot with CTC for the agricultural, the area that is apt for growing sorghum. We can then identify and explore where this is viable, where the irrigation would be useful. Because there are many places where sorghum can substitute maize because of droughts. There is a project as well in Argentina, where engineers work right throughout the year on this.
Então já existe, vamos dizer assim, desenvolver tecnologia nesse aspecto. E dos problemas foi que o sorgo, ele é muito.
One of the problems with sorghum is that it's a very sensitive. It's a very sensitive product. So where there is sugarcane, sorghum is something that is used with the herbicides. So
iniciativas, né? E vários estudos referentes aí ao zoneamento.
But there are various studies that refer to the studies of the soil. So whether for the production of grains or feed for cattle.
Sim, estratégias como
Professor Paulo, now the strategies for communication, geographical communication, certification, added value for products. These are strategies that are not really very valid for the external markets, or is it really a reality for the Brazilian consumer? I think that is an excellent question. I think that, yes, in Brazil, there is valuation. There is valued. For example, we want to get coffee, especially coffee, whether through internet or other areas. If you get a chocolate with this is special. But today we have a lot of geographical indications in Brazil. Of course, we have very great difficulty for having geographical indication. So sometimes, in some cases, we have associations that talk about the areas of origin, but in other cases, there is a problem as far as this geographical indication is concerned. So if you know about 5 or 6 areas of origin or geographical indication, you know a lot. So that is a difficulty that we have when we work with this type of project, of product rather. In Bahia, there are areas that have managed to get this geographical indication. The Ministry of Agriculture also gives grants geographical indication. But I see also on internet there are platforms where consumers can have access to this information. So I think that it's important to have a stamp of the origin, and this is the best way to recognize the value of a given product. Because there can be a lot of, as it happens, identity theft, for example, because you can have one sector might try to steal the origin of the other product. So that is a problem that arises. Mr. Walter, there is a problem. What is the best lesson that Brazil can teach Holland or can learn from Holland with respect to the whole question of sustainability? That is a very interesting question. I think that both countries are facing mutual challenges in our productive systems, but I think that when we look at the fact that we have to concentrate production in a small area and to have areas that are highly productive, in that case, when you have a more intensification, total productivity increases. And in this way, we are able to compensate, because this agricultural intensification can be useful for horticulture. Horticulture is a highly intensive activity. With a decreasing impact on the environment, and this can also be used for other types of productive systems. These are important lessons that can be learned, and there are lessons that Europe can in turn learn from Brazil. I think we can have more integrated systems. In Brazil, we see that we can learn from each other. We're going to try to build partnerships, and I think that these are two very important elements. Thank you, Dr. Eduardo. Just one question. Agriculture in the last few years has increased significantly in production as well as the practices. But there's still lack of information available to the public on this. What would be the best way to show the progress that has been made? Thank you so much for the question. And I think that the best way is precisely to work together to try to build partnerships and try to communicate science and the importance of sustainability in the not only for livestock, but also in agricultural production with respect to the initiative that we call Assessment for Sustainable Agriculture and Sustainable Livestock, is the fact that we have to look at the international impact. We have to make sure that what we do is communicated to all of our partners throughout the world, and that they can hear us and they can apply our systems and communicate to their governments that these practices be implemented. I think that these types of partnerships are very helpful. And of course, the use of the means of communication that we have, for example, to spread and expand the messages. We can all spread the message individually. So as long as what we are communicating is scientifically and solid information. Thank you so much, Mr. Eduardo. So we have some questions for Alberto. I'm going to read the questions one by one.
I'm going to read them one by one. First of all, banana is a special type of species, and so there are concerns for the expansion. The Prowoski, are there any strategies for bringing together small producers for there to be greater incentive for organic production? Thank you very much. With regard to improved genetics, we are working on the banana crop for many years in this area. We have new varieties for many years. With regard to bananas,
ela é estéril, ela é produzida vegetativamente.
call it.
Mas a banana, que a gente chama banana selvagem, ela é uma
This
e ela cruza, tem semente, ela é viável sexualmente.
the varieties can be crossed, and so this is viable. So there is a lot of diversity in the banana crop. So the extension of banana is important, but there are many species which are being worked with. I believe that there can be extension in bananas with regard to associations of producers. This is something that does exist. In some cases, there's still room for improvement. We can't say that it is already a done deal, a fact. We do need incentives for organization, as we did for school feeding programs. Those producers have access to markets, and this is a very interesting market for small producers. However, there is still need for organization for those mechanisms to be accessed by them. We do have some examples, but I do believe that there is a need for us to move forward. The last question for Dr. Alberto. Last question for our session today before we draw the session to a close. This is a question that I wanted to ask, and somebody from the public identified this. Is it possible to in terms of the demand for the next decade and if we could hear a bit more on how we plan to meet that need. That's $1 million question, and it's a great question that we have, the big question that we need to answer. I really don't have the answer. What I see is that the development of research in connection with sustainability. Research will provide viable data, and we will see how we can use inputs and how changes can be made. It is time that will tell. We don't yet know whether this will be 100% organic. I wouldn't be able to say, but I will say that the research is being carried out. What are the chemical products of major sustainability? I wouldn't be able to say what will happen and how. That's hard to say. Thank you very much for your answers. Just to conclude this session, where we have been given so much information and data, where we have been able to have so many reflections, I would just like to make us a brief summary. As I said, since the start, since 1997, I have been studying environmental issues. And at the beginning of my career, these issues relating to sustainability, especially the environmental aspect, were spoken about as if there were lots of divergences. But I think in this session, we have seen through the examples, the initiatives, the studies, and the implementation and application of these models, we see that we are changing and moving towards convergence. Of course, market demand has an important role to play. But we hope that we will be moving towards sustainability on our agenda. The issues raised by Dr. Guy, Dr. Paolo, and so on have given us evidence that we need to work on. The importance of technology, the environmental benefits. If we put that into effect, we will have results. Perhaps not in the short term, but in the medium and long term, we will see the economic benefits. The farmers, employers think in terms of the short term, but there is an important role for policymakers, not just to communicate the knowledge, but also to look at the socio-economic objectives. And we have seen tangible examples in terms of family farming, but we can replicate these in other areas of production. So I think this evidence that we are seeing of convergence, we need to communicate, we need to tell the society about, and particularly the productive sectors. And I do believe that the questions that we pose in technology does have a cost. We do need technical assistance. Traditional agriculture is not prepared to move to an integrative model. So we do need human and financial resources. And I think that this came out in all of the presentations, that we need professionalization, that we need training, that the systematic use of planning. And most of the presentations mentioned the phytosanitary risks, economic and environmental risks, financial risks. But all of these risks can be attenuated with the adoption of technology that is more sustainable in terms of the environment. So I think that there are questions which were very interesting, and the issues that we discussed, of course, we didn't have time to go in depth into each of them, have been interesting, and it was a pleasure for me to moderate this session. I would like to thank our organizers, Ika, Mbrape, but also our participants, our guest speakers and presenters, and the public, the audience at large. I hope that this has been a fruitful dialogue for you. And I wish you a wonderful afternoon and evening to all our colleagues. Thank you very much.
Obrigado, amigos. Forte abraço. Obrigado, professora Silvia.
Obrigada a todos vocês. Prazer conhecê-los, estar aqui com vocês.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you all. It's a pleasure for us. It's a pleasure to know you. Thank you for being with us. A hug, hugs. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure being here. Warm regards to all.
E, pessoal, muito obrigado. Chegamos ao fim de mais um componente. Foi excelente, muito agradecido.
Thank you very much. This was excellent. We have reached the end. Professor